We're at the end of this module 3 about improving productivity in critical operations, and we're going to talk about productivity metrics and data analysis today. So we're looking mostly at metrics and key performance indicators and distribution curves, etc. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So this is the last of the module 3, and then we'll be looking at visual management and things like plan, do, check, act, which I think we've covered a couple of times for the final module, which Neil will be taking you through. So today we're going to understand and utilize measures to drive improvements. We're going to have a look at, obviously we'll have a quick review of how things are going, quick review of what we discussed last time, and then we're going to talk about what measures, an introduction to measures, what the different dimensions of measures are. We'll do a quick exercise, and then we'll do a summary, and then we'll have a chat about what the call to action will be, so standard format. So our previous session, we talked about short interval control, about us looking at breaking down sort of long targets for weeks and months, for orders or for shifts, where we can then start to see opportunities to make improvements, to make change before we get to the end of the time and that point where it's too late to do something. So we talked about that short interval control. We talked about a week or a day, how you can break those down into 2-hourly or 3-hourly chunks to see how you progress towards an end of day or end of shift or end of week target. And the opportunity that gives you is to be able to do something about exceptions. So if things are going better than expected or worse than expected. And we talked about what data do you need to capture in terms of productivity and quality. And we talked about a process for each day, about working out how you break down the intervals, etc. Let's talk about measures, is what we're going to talk about today. So why measure? Data is one stage, but then being able to take some action, isn't it? Being able to see how things are going, to see how things are performing, to enable you to see if you need to do something about it. So, measuring is about being able to take some action and understand how things are going and to have the data to enable you to do that. How do you know how you've got on? If you don't measure things, how do you know how it's gone? That's absolutely right. Yeah. So if you don't know how it's gone, how can you draw some conclusions and take some actions? Absolutely. So all of those things are really important about why we measure. So yes, about having the data to enable you to draw some conclusions, to enable you to take some action. All really, really important stuff. So yeah, so we think about how things are going and need to see if changes we've had has made a desirable effect. So yeah, so we've talked mostly about these things that say we need to understand how things are going, so how we conclude how things are going. But also, as we do change, as we change the process, if we don't measure what the difference is before and after the change, how do we know it's got better? So it's a very important thing from a point of view of making improvements as well. So I'm pleased that, I asked a couple of you as we went through some of the improvements you implemented, you're able to actually evidence the change by measuring it. So you're able to say we're able to produce more, we're able to improve the quality, etc. But the most important things from us from a lean perspective is about we really understand how we're getting on, really understand are we delivering what we expected? And as we improve things, can we evidence that the improve has made a change? Also, it's used for control. It can be used for reward and recognition, can be used for forecasting and planning as well. But also from our point of view, it's about how are things going and can we evidence that as we make a change, things got better. So the danger with some change is that we make it and don't measure the change and measure the improvement. And therefore, we might have made it worse. And sometimes that does happen. So we have dimensions of measures. So we're talking about what things would you measure in a process? And we have a fairly simple matrix of the 3 things we push people to measure. And they're fairly simple, and you will be doing some of these already. So Quality is about how good is the output and the process in the eyes of the customer. So are we delivering to the customer's expectation in terms of the quality of the products? So I know we talk a lot about this within this sector about the quality of the thing we produce. So while we're measuring that, can we understand what is the quality of what we're producing? The cost is how much does the output cost to produce. So this will be in terms of labor, equipment, etc. So how much does it cost? And finally, delivery, how quickly do we do it? And are we producing it to the schedule? So 3 simple dimensions of quality, how good it is, how much does the output cost, and how quickly are we doing it, and are we delivering it to the expectation of the customer? So for quality and delivery, they're very much customer expectation based about what's the quality in the eyes of the customer, when does the customer want it. We also think about, in terms of supporting a process, are we also doing these things in a safe way, and are the people doing the work happy in their work? So we always encourage people to think about this very sort of targeted operational measures. Are we balancing them with some understanding of those involved and interacting in the process? Are we being safe? Are people happy in their work? So they're the 5 dimensions we have. The first 3, the operational impact of the process, quality, cost, delivery. Just always think of those in terms of measures. And then safety and morale about, actually, are we looking after the people who are doing the work? So what often happens is there's a bit of a bias. So businesses have a bias towards a particular area of measurements and a particular area of what they do. So I've given a couple of examples here. So the NHS generally is very focused on quality, we'd all be pleased to know. So they're interested in ensuring that people get better. And at the worst end of the spectrum, they're interested in not obviously killing people or making them more poorly. So quality is one of their key things. And interestingly, they're more balanced with that than with costs. So the thing that gives in the NHS is delivery. So waiting lists, long lead times to get appointments, etc., is because they're biased towards, we have to ensure the quality and we're against a strict budget. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that's why we see long waiting lists. For places like McDonald's, they have a consistent quality, but they're mostly focused on cost and delivery. More focused down towards that part of the measuring spectrum. So lots of businesses have a bias, and I would have a think about, if you think about the things you measure on a daily, a weekly or monthly basis, is there a particular area you're biased towards? Are we just measuring output, just measuring delivery? Are we measuring quality to the level we should? Because what will happen is we'll get a bias towards the output if we think about the way we measure things. So as we look at processes and we look at performance of processes, we're ensuring that we're measuring across certainly those 3 top dimensions. Another good thing is to think about a hybrid of those measures. So I've got one here that can be highly effective. So rather than just picked products per day, a good measure that has all of the 3 dimensions is volume of good products picked per person per day. So good products being the quality metric of that, delivery being the volume, and the cost is the per person per day. So good quality through good products, delivery is the volume, and the picked per person per day. You could also have delivered to schedule as well, if we were thinking it from a customer point of view. So sometimes, although you want these 3 dimensions, it's about maybe encapsulating those dimensions into a single measure for people. So it's trying to get a hybrid measure of that quality, cost, and delivery. So quality, cost, delivery being the 3 dimensions of measures. So those 3 things, the quality, being the quality of the product that you pick for the customer to their standard. So whatever that might be. The volume is about the delivery. So have you picked the volume you required? The per person per day is a cost measure, because the cost of picking is the people. So you've got those 3 dimensions in a single thing that says, actually, I've got good products, So good product is a very broad term as well. You know, there's be something more definite about what good product means, but the right quality products picked, how many were picked per person per day, is a hybrid of those three things. So what you want to try and be is have a balance across the three, because you'll bias your performance towards the ones that you measure. It's ideal to be in the middle, but if if for example the thing you're doing is actually producing high quality and actually cost isn't a concern, then you might bias your measures that particular way. But I would assume for the types of businesses you would want to be roughly in the middle. So there's some examples of standard measures used. These are ones that we always used to use in manufacturing, about right first time, delivery schedule achievement, parts per operator per house, value added per person, overall equipment effectiveness, utilization, stock turns, etc. I think that the ones that I would suggest are important are the ones towards the top, about, you know, right when it says not right first time, but right first time, delivery schedule achievement, parts per operator, etc. are the important ones. But try and think of those measures that work for your business and the things that you can capture in terms of the data. The other thing to say is, I've underlined it on here, the word key. So we often measure lots and lots of things. So again, it's about having the few key critical performance indicators for a process or for a business, rather than hundreds and hundreds. So what are the key measures that help you understand how your business is performing? The few key ones. So I want you to have a bit of a think about that in terms of either for your processes you're working on or your part of the business. Have a think about the measures you have and maybe some of the areas where you don't have measures. Just have a think about what we could do. Brilliant. Right, so we'll crack on. So I'll quickly just go back through these three things again, this quality, cost and delivery, and then I'll get you to have a quick go at this exercise. So again, let's just quickly go through these three dimensions of measures. So quality, how good is the output, and the process in the eyes of the customer. So when you're thinking about the process or the area you're working in, what's the measure of success of that process? So how do you know it's gone well? What's the measure of success in the eyes of the customer? So for a fruit, it might be the quality of the fruit. Yeah, so just think about what's the quality. The cost is how much cost has gone into it. So in most processes, this is people. For delivery, it's often how much output has come out, or have we delivered to the schedule for the customer? So I'll just go around those again. So quality is, in the eyes of the customer, often what is a sign of the quality of the product. Or if we think about the process and what it's trying to achieve, how will we understand whether it's done a good job or not in terms of quality? The cost is how much time and effort we've put into it, and delivery is how much have we actually done, or have we delivered to the schedule? So I want you to have a think about, I'll give you sort of 10 minutes to have a think about, if you think about the processes you're working on, what measures do you currently have? So have a think about how they fit into that quality, cost and delivery. What measures do you currently have? There might be some hybrid ones as well. And if you haven't got measures in particular areas, what could those measures be? Don't try and constrain yourself with what the art of the possible is in the first instance. Have a think about what measures you currently have in terms of measuring the performance of the processes you're looking at, or of your business as a whole, whichever you choose. Put those in first of all, and then if you've got gaps in the boxes, have a think about what things you could do to fill those gaps as well. I've got a couple of handouts for this as well. Just a sort of a quick and dirty sort of what measures are about the dimensions, etc. And also, if in the future you want to have a think about process measures, there's a template also about outputs, etc., about thinking about measures of a process or of a change as well. So they'll all be up on the team's sites. So I just wanted to quickly talk about presenting and analysing measures. So I think I've mentioned the first point already, that key means key. So key performance indicators. So trying to keep to a few. So when you were talking about, sort of, I suppose 6 to 12 measures, that feels about right in terms of key performance indicators for a process. So don't have 20 odd. What are the key ones that give you an indication? So I think, as you were talking about those 1 or 2 things around quality, those 1 or 2 things around delivery, etc. Try and keep it focused on the few. Think carefully about targets. Think about how you set expectations and targets for the day. Do these motivate or demotivate people? So be realistic with targets. Just putting the target up doesn't necessarily change anything. It just makes people more stressed. So think about how you set targets. If you're thinking about visual sort of representation of these things, the uses of colors is quite nice. So showing green as on target, red as below target is nice to visually show how things are going. And again, it's also good to see trends on graphs. So, everything's going upwards, it means things are improving. For improvement purposes, try and think about accentuating the negative, just so it focuses the mind. So if you're in the 95% is good, then display the 5% rather than the 95%, just to try and focus efforts on reducing the 5% in terms of bad. So just think about those things. Yeah, not too many measures, which was great. I heard that you haven't got loads. Careful with targets, use colors, use graphs are great ways of representing these things. Share them is the other thing, is that, people, as you were saying earlier when we were talking about the things you did around the interval control, people do react to seeing measures and performance. They do react to it generally quite well, as long as the things they're being asked to do are achievable. So yeah, do all of those things. They're really good practice. Just a quick one about analysing performance and measures. Be a bit cautious of averages, as we tend to use averages quite a lot across teams. So we say the average of the team is this, or the average performance is this. And what it doesn't tend to show is the outliers. So we always are keen to get people to think about what's the range of performance rather than just averages. This is, sorry, probably a slightly more mathematical term, but this is thinking about, if I've got my one hand in a fire and one hand in a freezer, then on average I should be fine. But actually the reality is my hand that's in the freezer is too cold and my hand that's in the fire is way too hot. So we just got to be careful of always thinking of averages across teams. So that's just what this caution's about. The other thing is, if you do get these sort of curves, and this is a bell curve, and this is often how performance goes across teams, etc. You often see this types of distribution where we have people that are around the average, then we have people who are better, a few that are particularly high performing, a few that are slightly lower, and then a few that are really at the bottom end. If you think about improving people, just trying to move them up a quartile is a lot more effective than thinking you're going to get everyone to this far right. Just thinking about getting people to move from one quarter to the next. So getting the worst performing to move to the sort of just below average, getting below average to move to just above average, that is a far more achievable way of thinking about performance across teams. And I think I showed you this, we've shown you this example before of this team that was sticking and how the variety in the performance over a period of time, in terms of the worst being at 11, the best being at 23, so twice as good. And then we've got some people in the middle. But actually what we found is if we took this and just thought about moving the red one here in this bottom corner up into the same area as these and moving 1 or 2 of these up into the high performing, we find that it has quite a shift in terms of making an improvement. So you'd get a 20% productivity improvement if we were just able to move half of those people up a quartile each time. So have a think about that, because that's more achievable than saying what people often do is go, well, 23 is the quickest, and therefore we'll assume everyone goes at 23. So just think about how you gradually improve people. And the other thing to look at graphs. Again, we won't go through this, but as you look at trends on graphs, be cautious of just making assumptions based on a couple of data points. that it shows improvement, but it's not enough data points. When you see things going up and down like this, you see this blue area here of things flying up and down when you look at a performance graph, that often means it's not in control. So it means that, you know, its performance is very varied day on day, week on week. This is the type of graph that you want to see, that there's some consistency and it's moving in the right direction. And then occasionally you'll get these blips where things go out of kilter, and they're often things that are unpredictable, sorry. Things that are unpredictable events occurred that means that performance has gone slightly awry. So as you're showing measures, you know, just be cautious of, you know, not making too many big statements after a few data points. If you see things going up and down like that, that means there's often a lack of control, and hopefully where you'll get to is a trend of it moving in the right direction. So just a very quick summary then, and then we'll sort of have a sort of a final call to action and a shut off. So we've talked about, we measure to understand how things are going. So for us, the important thing is if we don't measure, we don't know how well we're doing. And also if we don't measure when we make change, we don't know if the change has made it better or worse. So those are the important things for us from a lean point of view. Have we really understood that the change that we're making has made a difference? And also on a daily, weekly basis, do we know how we're performing? There's three primary dimensions: quality, cost, and delivery. So these are, how does the process perform or the business perform against the quality in the eyes of the customer, the cost to deliver that quality, and delivery being the volume or adherence to the customer's requirements in terms of dates of when they want it. And it's supported by safety and morale. So by delivering those measures for the customer, are we confident that we're doing it in a safe way and the people who are doing the work are happy? So balance as best you can to drive non-biased performance. So don't drive just delivery, because you might get biased towards that over quality. Keep it to the vital few. I've said about think carefully about how you use targets and be cautious about averages that conceal real performance. So I think that's it for us today. So we're going to move on to module 3 next, where we're going to talk about visual management. So we've started to drift onto some of the things about visual management and plan, do, check, act. So really our last area is really about trying to embed some of the things you've learned into a system where you can see improvements as time goes on, so you can visualize how things improve. So Neil will be both with you next time, so I'll be handing over to Neil. So I'll be joining you for the start of the session. Just as you think about your areas of improvement, just have a think about before next time, about thinking about how you've used measures to evidence improvements. So I think it seems like in terms of the measures you currently used, you've got a fairly nice balance across your processes. The area just to think about is, as you make change, are we balancing our measurement of success across quality, cost, and delivery? So have a think about that, and maybe think about how you display and communicate measures to the team as well. And I think you've already demonstrated that by doing that, sometimes it gives some advantage.